Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. This is my first trip to Bahrain, so I was quite excited to come over and see the country, though I do come into the region occasionally as well. So my challenge today is, how can you possibly achieve HSE Excellence without having good learning within your organisation? So that's something I'd like to explore in the next few minutes. Very briefly first though, the IChemE Safety Centre is an industry-led consortium focused on improving process safety around the world in all of our different businesses and activities we do. So we have a range of different members that are part of our centre that contribute to all of our work, as well as we engage with universities because we believe that it is vitally important to improve the future education as well. What we mean by process safety though is when you consider looking at how you can achieve good process safety, what do you need to think about in your organisations? And we argue that process safety outcomes are all about effective leadership, but that effective leadership across 6 particular areas in an organisation. So we talk about knowledge and competence, engineering and design, systems and procedures, assurance, human factors and culture. And we believe that these 6 areas cut through an organisation so that a failure in one of these areas can actually appear in multiple parts of your organisation. So that's why we think that we need to focus on these particular areas to really advance process safety. But importantly, these same areas apply to occupational safety, they also apply to environmental management, and they apply to a number of other parts of our organisations as well. So this is not different, it's not separate, it's actually something we need to be doing already. I want to just hone in on one of those areas though today for my conversation here, and that's knowledge and competence. Because one of the key factors, as I said, is if we're not learning, how can we possibly achieve excellence? So my question for you is, how do you know your people are competent? And what are you doing in that space? And I very specifically use the word competent here as opposed to knowledgeable, because we believe that knowledge is around being aware and having some understanding. You can achieve knowledge by doing a training course, but you're not competent yet. So competent is about the application of that. As the great Trevor Kletz once said, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not enough to simply have the knowledge, you have to actually apply it as well. So determining that competence is a very important part of it, and it's more than just a training course. It's about the on-the-job experience and being able to do the work sustainably. Also importantly though is, how do they learn? How are we presenting material for people so they can actually learn, in particular from incidents of the past? And this is a very big focus area of the work that we do in the centre, because we do not believe that industry or people effectively learn from the incidents of the past. If we learnt from them, we wouldn't still be having them. And we are seeing repeat incidents again and again and again all over the world. So there's something missing here, there's a gap. So from that perspective, we've developed a number of different resources that are available to try and assist in knowledge and competence. And I'm just briefly going to mention some of them here. So we've published some guidance information on how to achieve assurance in your organisation. This is freely available to anybody that would like it. We've also developed a competency framework though that applies right from your operators, but more importantly, we focus on the very upper end of an organisation. So we heard yesterday from some chief executive officers that are very passionate and obviously have knowledge of process safety, and that is fantastic. But that's not the case everywhere in the world. So our executives, our senior managers, our directors, the chairmen of our companies, they need to know certain things about process safety, and we have defined what we believe their competence should be. From the engineer perspective, and in my introduction you heard that I'm a professional process safety engineer. This is a recognition of competence. So this is a very important phase, because this is not just merely that I have knowledge in process safety, but I have demonstrated my competence through an assessment process to a range of my peers, and they have deemed that I am a professional process safety engineer. So this is important to try and share the learnings amongst others, amongst our peers. But the key areas I really wanted to talk about from a learning perspective today is We see incidents and we see them repeat all the time. We're not learning the lesson. So what do we need to do differently here? How can we look at it a little bit differently? And so this has led to some work in looking at the concept of what's called hindsight bias. So how do we understand the incident case study that we're reading or that we're watching the video of? And there's some really valuable information out there. But when you know what the outcome is, it's really obvious to see what went wrong to get there. And that's the biggest challenge in learning. Because when you read the case study or you see the video and you know what happened, you find yourself thinking, I wouldn't have made that mistake. That mistake was just silly. Why did they do that? That made no sense. That's actually inhibiting our ability to learn from a psychological perspective. So we've decided we need to tell you case studies in a different way. So we're encouraging people that when you investigate incidents or when you want to share case studies, to really think about why the decisions were made. What was the context that people were following at the time? Because if we understand what drove their decisions, that's when we can actually take action to resolve the issues. The case studies that I mentioned, we've developed them, they're available for anybody that is interested, but we actually ask you to make a decision throughout the process. So we give you some information, we ask you to make a decision. When we give you the same information that the people on the day had without knowing the consequence, most people make the same decision the people on the day made. So it actually reinforces that we are no better than the people that were in the incident. We are capable ourselves of making the same mistakes, creating the same issues. And this is where we think new ways of learning are vitally important. We have to continue to challenge ourselves to come up with different ways of learning, because the current ways we're using have just not delivered the outcomes that we need in industry. So my challenge to you all is, when it comes to looking at understanding our incidents, understanding what we're doing in our organisations, looking at our competency and looking at our learning processes, what do we need to do differently? Let's get a bit creative and think about how we can actually do something differently. So that was all I wanted to cover in the brief introduction part, and then obviously there'll be the panel discussion afterwards, so I look forward to talking with you about the questions that you have. Thank you.